It's the Bird Emergency, the podcast about how birds are disappearing and what we need to do to hang on to them. I'm Grant Williams, and I'm into birds. That's my special skill. I'm into birds. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, it's the honour roll, and I've picked out two today. Kylie Soanes. I hope that's how I pronounce your name. Hope it's Soanes and not Soanes. Kylie has received a Melbourne Research Interruption Fellowship at the University of Melbourne for next year, working on something that I'm pretty interested in, the artificial habitats for urban wildlife. So if you're interested in following up on what Kylie will be doing, get on Twitter, hashtag urban biodiversity. And a special one, I noticed that our very first bird emergency guest, Dr. Stephanie Burrell, she's landed her dream job as Pacific Marine and Pacific Regional Coordinator with BirdLife International Marine Program. So that's Steph's dream job. Congratulations, Steph. And basically, Steph is going to be saving seabirds. That's the honour roll for this week. If you would like to be mentioned or know somebody who's had some notable achievement that needs to be mentioned, just send it in to me, news@thebirdemergency.com. And now into the guts of the interview. And I'm really, really lucky because when I turn this mic on, I get to speak to some people who are doing really amazing stuff with birds that need a hand. And today we've got Kat Young, who is a behavioural ecologist. I got that right, didn't I, Kat?
Yes, that's right.
And you're speaking to us from the lovely surrounds there in Bruny Island. And Bruny Island, for those who don't know Australia well, sort of hangs off the southeast side of Tasmania, which hangs off the southeast side of Australia. Now I'm imagining, Kat, that there's not too many people down there at Bruny.
I mean, this weekend you'd be surprised. It's things are starting to opening up in Tasmania, and Bruny is quite a popular destination for both locals and tourists. So we're becoming a little bit busier here at the moment, which is lovely to see people around. But even then, I mean, when I say busy, it's still quite a quiet place. And here we're on quite a big reserve down at Inala, and so we've got a lot of space to run around and not come across anybody. It's really beautiful.
Well, Kat, tell us why there is a reserve at Inala. What is it about that location that requires a reserve?
It is the Forty-spotted Pardalote, which is an endangered endemic bird. So they only live in Tasmania, and they're very limited in their range now. They're really restricted to Maria Island, and there's a small population on the mainland, but they're real island specialty. And this Inala exists because of them. So Dr. Tonya Cochrane, who owns Inala, she bought this property because she knew that there was a colony of pardalotes here. And she has been tree planting and expanding their habitat here. So now we have a really great stronghold for them.
Now, when you said the mainland, we need to sort of point out that you mean the mainland of Tasmania. The Forty-spotted Pardalote is a Tasmanian-only bird, and the offshore islands, as you mentioned. What are the main competitive pressures that the Forty-spotted Pardalote has to deal with there?
Yes, so sorry, I did say the mainland. In Tasmania, we have the mainland, which is Tasmania, and the mainland, which is Australia. So we do, forget sometimes that we are part of the larger Australia down on Bruny Island. But the pardalotes here, their biggest problem is really land clearing. So they're very much tied to the Eucalyptus viminalis, or the white gum, or some people call it a manna gum as well. And they're very, very tied to that particular species of tree. And so the biggest problem is really land clearing.
Are the other pardalote species that we'd be familiar with in southeast Australia, are they present in any of the range of the 40 spotted?
Yes, we get both the spotted pardalote and the striated pardalote. And the striated pardalotes will outcompete the 40 spots for nesting hollows in some areas. So the great thing about places like this is when you get a little colony of 40 spots and they're here in numbers, they're able to compete with the striated pardalotes. But when more dispersed habitats, say there's only a few white gums dispersed amongst the forests, then they can get bullied a little bit more by the striateds.
So are the striatids able to use other tree species and are not limited just to the presence of Eucalyptus viminalis?
Yeah, absolutely. The striatids are very much more generalists. So the 40 spots are restricted to the viminalis because what they actually feed their nestlings is a sugary sap that's produced by the leaves of the viminalis. So they go around the tree and they've got a little specialized hook on the end of their bill, and they will make little scratches on the stem of the leaf, and then they'll come back around later when the tree has exuded this sugary sap that we call manna, and that is almost exclusively what they're feeding their nestlings. Whereas the striated pardalotes will eat mostly insects, so they've got a lot more options.
So the 40 spotted pardalote is a farmer.
It is a farmer, exactly.
Now that's something I've read. I've read a lot about. Well, in bird books, I'm not going to say that I've read a lot of research on the 40 spotted pardalote, but that's something I'd never heard before. Is that unique among the pardalotes?
It's pretty unique. Farming in birds is not very widespread, and so definitely the 40 spot is very special for this behaviour.
See, that to me, apart from just the general need to preserve bird species on all species just because they are, that seems to me to be like a real headline reason of why we should be putting extra special efforts into preserving the 40 spotted pardalote. That behaviour is unusual, as you say, but it demonstrates, or it indicates. I probably shouldn't say demonstrates. As a scientist, you'll probably tell me off for using that terminology, but it seems to indicate an intelligence that we may not have credited them with.
Absolutely, and I think this is very generally across a lot of animal species. We definitely don't credit them enough for their intelligence. Um, I think it makes us seem, it makes us, we want to be superior to the rest of the animal kingdom, and intelligence is one of those things that people really hold on to, being a very human trait.
Well, let's talk a bit generally about the 40 spotted pardalote. They're a very small bird, and they're a very by. I mean, if you put them out on their own and you put them into a photo shoot, they're a pretty drab looking bird. So they're going to be unnoticed by a lot of people, and I guess a lot of people don't. You're never going to see them in aviaries and whatnot. People aren't going to say, "Oh, wow, I've got a 40 spotted pardalote." What is it about them in the ecological niche that makes them really important? Is there a reason why the environment there at Bruny and the surrounding islands, do they need the 40 spotted pardalote?
I think you're being a bit unfair to them. They're a very beautiful bird. They are about the same size and colour as a eucalypt leaf, but they have these beautiful bright yellow cheek patches if you see them up close, and they're so delicate. Um, they they are just as important as every other species in the environment. They've got this special relationship with the viminalis. And so that's what makes them really vulnerable. I like to think of them as a really good indicator of how we treat our environment. So if we if we know that they're tied to the viminalis, and we know that to protect the viminalis, and if we can't do that, then I think we're in a lot of trouble. So for me, they're most important as an indicator of environmental health.
Now, you mentioned that they occur in colonies, and they are a hollow nester. So, are they cooperative feeders and all that, or within a loose colony, do they pair off and and do their breeding as a pair?
Yeah, so I guess when I say colony, I just mean that there's a lot of pairs will nest in an area, but they are actually territorial within that area. So pairs will defend a little territory. Depending on the habitat, it's probably a tree or even um, half of a tree. And so they will, because they've got this resource of the viminalis leaves that they really need to be able to defend, to be able to raise chicks, and of course the nesting hollows as well. Um, so they're very cute. They will have little territory disputes right on the boundary of their territories, and they yell at each other. But it's not like us yelling at each other. They're just going to go wait. It's very sweet.
Um, I guess a lot of people on the mainland will be familiar with the sound of the spotted pardalote because they're at some times of the year they're ubiquitous, but most people don't ever see them, but they certainly hear them. Is the 40-spotted pardalote, does it vocalise in a similar way? Does it carry as far?
It does vocalize a lot, but it's very quiet. It's a very quiet call, and not that sort of punchy spotted pardalote call. It's much more subtle.
Okay, I might. Uh, I'll put the spotted pardalote call if Mr. Zeno Cantor will let me. I'll include that. I don't think I can include the 40 spotted call because I think that's restricted. Um, you might
Oh,
know the answer to that.
I don't think it is restricted.
Okay, well I'll put
No.
them both on if possible as a comparison, and then if people are bushwalking in eastern Tasmania, they may hear something and be very, very surprised that they've got a gem in the midst. Now, Kat, how limited is the Tasmanian mainland distribution of the 40 spot?
From what we know, it's mostly a small population and it's adjacent to Bruny Island on mainland Tasmania, just across the channel from Bruny Island. It's very close to where we are here, um, and there's just a few spots of white gum. It's possible that there might be a little bit more that we don't know of on private property, but mapping of white gum is quite good, and it suggests that they're really just restricted to the southeast here.
Have you got a population estimate for the entire population?
I don't know, but watch this space, I think, is, is the best way to say that. So it's a brilliant PhD student called Fernanda Alves, who's with the Difficult Bird Research Group, and she is doing a lot of these sort of modelling and working specifically on the 40-spotted pardalotes. And I don't know that she's got a population estimate at the moment, but there will be definitely some papers coming out in the not too distant future about her research.
Well, I'll get you to speak about the difficult bird group in a few minutes, but can you tell us a bit about the nesting of the 40 spotted pardalote? It nests in hollows. How large do they need to be? Are they typically branches that have broken off? Would they be hollows in forks, in clefts? What kind of situation does a hollow need to be in, and are you able to use artificial hollows to encourage breeding?
Yeah, so they're pretty small little birds, so they don't need very much in terms of a hollow. And they do build a beautiful domed nest inside the hollow as well. And they line it with feathers, and it looks really nice and snuggly. So they don't really need too much. and we do put up a lot of nesting boxes for them. So again, as part of the Difficult Bird Research Group, we have a lot of nest boxes, mostly on Bruny Island, but also some on Maria Island and also on mainland Tasmania, because they do take really well to nest boxes.
The dome nest they make, is that out of fibres and leaves, or do they use a material like mud?
It's grass. I'm pretty sure it's all
Okay,
grass.
and they line it with feathers and whatnot, or do they collect moss and things like that? How particular are they?
They seem to really like feathers. They just any sort of feather. I think my favorite, and you have to think. So this is a tiny little bird. So the entrance to the nest box is smaller than a 20-cent piece. And so I remember climbing up this tree and opening up a nest box and looking inside, and there's like a raven feather, like a primary wing feather from a raven, which has got to be about 3 or 4 times the size of a pardalote. Um, and I cannot imagine how it got it into that box. I just would have loved to have seen that. Um, but any sort of feather, they just love feathers.
Do they have colour preferences that you've been able to notice?
No, they a lot of the feathers will be sort of downy feathers that birds are shedding, and they're generally, those tend to be sort of greyish on most birds. So no real colour preference. I do love coming across the occasional um, uh, rosella feather in the nest. Adds a little bit of colour to it. But
Do they have a small clutch size, and do they usually raise multiple young in a clutch?
yeah, so they can have usually have about 4 or 5 nestlings, um, and they will have multiple clutches in a season. And they sometimes, if they start early enough, they can have 2 successful clutches, but often the first couple will fail, and they'll just keep trying until they are successful. Really.
Now, I noticed you had in I think it's on your website that there's a high mortality due to a parasitic fly. Is that right?
Yeah, that might be on the DBRG website. The parasitic fly um, was discovered by a PhD student working with the group a few years ago, and it is definitely the main cause of nesting mortality for these birds. So this fly will go into the nest and lay its eggs in the nest, and when they hatch, the larvae will burrow under the skin of the nestlings, and they'll feed on the blood. And it's almost always fatal for 40-spotted pardalotes. It also affects other birds like the striated pardalotes, but they're just a little bit bigger, and they eat protein, so they seem to be a little bit more able to cope with the fly larvae, and they will survive more often.
Are you aware of any other bird in Australia that's got the the same specialised diet as the 40 spotted?
A lot of our birds have very specialised diets. I often find that a lot of them are endangered. The swift parrot, primarily in the breeding season, will feed on blue gum or black gum flowers. And again, one of their main threats is habitat loss. So we've got a lot of these very specialised birds in Australia that are very endangered.
Do we have any other birds that are that we could classify as farmers in the same way that the 40 spotted is? I know that's pretty wide
Um,
with 700 and something species, but
There's nothing that I can think of off the top of my head, but I think that mostly we just don't know enough about a lot of our native species. So if you think about the research that is currently being done, it's only on a very small very small number of species compared to what we have here. So there's really so much we don't know.
All right. Well, let's open up the discussion a bit to the difficult birds group. What is it, and how did it get going?
So the Difficult Bird Research Group is a group of researchers at the Australian National University in Canberra. And so the head of the group is Professor Robert Heinzen. And they just somehow all ended up working on very difficult species. So all this that we don't know a lot about, and maybe that people haven't studied before because they are difficult. They live in remote areas, or they nest in inconvenient places. And we really and they're all they're mostly all endangered or threatened in some way. So really targeting those. So there's a quite a big group of us now, half in Canberra and New South Wales, and then half of us based in Tasmania.
Nobody, nobody based in either Victoria or Queensland.
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. Um, okay. So, how did I'm interested in how it began, and I haven't looked it up. So you have to really school me here. Was it just a loose interest that you all shared, and you all sort of started sharing information, or was there a real effort to put a formal group together and snag some dedicated funding and and just move the research forward for these particular group of birds?
So I guess it starts as any research group starts at a university. So Professor Rob Heinzen started working at ANU, and I think he's done a lot in his time, but one of his pet projects are actually he has worked up in Queensland. So his pet projects up there are the collector's parrots on Cape York, and also the palm cockatoos, which I think he's probably hoping to start up more work on them in the future. But so I guess he started up that work and just attracted students to come and work with him. And um, and one of them was Dr. Dejan Stojanovic. He's going to tell me off for pronouncing his name wrong, I'm sure, but he started a PhD with Rob working on the swift parrots, and that is really how the Tasmanian base grew. And then other people have just slowly joined the group, and many of them have gone from PhDs into postdocs, where they're able to get funding. And we've slowly grown.
Now, do you get invited to join the group? Is there a secret society handshake?
There is not, but there should be. So I guess one of the main ways that people join the group is through PhD research. So somebody will either approach the group with an idea, or there might be an idea that somebody has come up with, and that might be advertised, and then that people apply for a position to come study.
Now, is the funding exclusively through ANU? Because I know it's always difficult to get funding to enable you to do field research. So, is it through ANU, or is there some crossover with the we have in Australia the Threatened Species Recovery Hub? Uh, how let's talk about your project. How are you managing to fund your research?
So my position with the group is as I guess as a, um, a field technician or research tech. So I work across all the projects, depending on who needs help with what. So I'm very lucky in that. And in that way, my funding comes from lots of little pots of money. So every project has its own little pot of money. Some might be from offsets from various projects, or from grants that have been that have been awarded. We did get some money from the Threatened Species Commissioner to do some little pots of work. So orange belly parrots was that particular project, and then PhDs come with a little bit of funding from ANU. We've also been so blessed by a lot of support from the public in a few crowdfunding campaigns. And because funding is so difficult in the traditional routes, especially for this kind of work, we've had 3 crowdfundings now for different projects, and the response has just been incredible.
Yes, I did see the crowdfunding for the orange-bellied parrot. That must have been nearly 2 years ago, I guess now, and that reached its goal very quickly. Have you done some specifically for the 40-spotted?
No, not specifically. So the that crowdfunding campaign did reach its target and then some. So some of that extra funding did go to the Forty-spotted Pardalote project, and Fernanda, who's a PhD student working on Forty-spotted Pardalote, she's got her own funding from other grants that she's applied for herself as well.
Oh, that's terrific. I did reach out to Fernanda, but I haven't been able to speak to her. So you're off on. You've got the head start on taking the 40-spotted Pardalote glory.
Oh dear.
So,
No, I can't take the glory. She does some really amazing work, and I think you should really hopefully get a chance to chat to her. She's just
I hope
very
so.
passionate about it.
I'm also really interested to speak to her about the work she did before she came to Australia, because she worked with some pretty far out birds in South America too. So, but we'll leave that for another time. Now you've worked with some pretty amazing Australian birds apart from the 40-spotted. Now, are you happy to talk about the bully of the Australian aviary scene?
Oh, my crimson finches, or
Yes.
blood finches, as I think they're called in the aviary scene.
Yeah. Now, how, your research was really talking about the plumage and how that affected the dominating nature of the species. Is that a fair summation?
Yes, yeah. So I'm going to just go and plug my computer in
Okay.
while we're talking. Okay. Otherwise, I think my battery's going to die.
How cool is that? Imagine telling our parents that we could do this. That you could just pick up the computer. You could be talking to someone who's, I must be about 600 k's away from you, I'd guess, and that you can just walk around with this device and you can just go and plug it in somewhere.
Absolutely. I mean,
It's so
it's
cool.
the things that we're used to being commonplace now is crazy.
I remember my dad telling me when we were watching cricket when I was pretty young. I'll just put you back. There you are. You're back in the stream. Um, yeah, I remember my dad telling me, and he was, "Whoa, you're out again. We've got to put you in again."
How did I do that?
There we go.
Sorry.
I think when something disconnected, it just popped you out. Yeah, 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 yeah. No, my dad, who lived to his mid-80s, he was telling me that his father would have been just just could not comprehend that we would be able to watch cricket on television coming from the other side of the world. And now we can just do pretty much anything. I mean, the video conferencing and stuff is just amazing, amazing.
Absolutely. And down here on Bruni, where I don't have any phone reception as well, but we have an internet connection, so you can still do these things. It's crazy.
Okay, so you've got a landline, and then you have a wireless repeater somewhere there, do you?
I really have absolutely no idea how it works if I'm honest, but it works.
It doesn't really matter how, as long as it does. All right, let's go back to talking about the crimson finch, or as some people would know it as the crimson parrot finch. I think some people call it, and as you called it, the blood finch, because another one of its nicknames. What got you interested in those guys? And just tell us what your work entailed and what you discovered.
Yeah, so I didn't really intend to work on crimson finches. I had an opportunity to work in the Kimberley with Gouldian finches, and while I was up there, I just was just having some lunch on a lawn in Kununurra with my supervisor, and this group of crimson finches came past us, and we were just watching them, and um, saw one jump on the other one and have a little bit of a rough and tumble around, um, and everybody just carried on as if it was just the most normal thing in the world for this to happen. This little brawl happening in the middle of their lunch hour, and we just looked at it and went, "What is happening there?" And my supervisor said, I'd love somebody to work on crimson finches. And I said, I would love to work on crimson finches. and that was that. So what we were really interested in is how they live in these social groups. So you'll always see a group of crimson finches. Um, and somehow they manage to live in groups, but you always see them fighting. And they don't do any sort of social positive social behavior, so you'll never see them grooming each other or preening each other. Um, but they somehow manage to live in these groups, and they're also, as the name crimson would suggest, they are bright red, and red is such a really aggressive color in nature. So we just really wanted to understand how that all worked.
And so, what did you conclude?
So we concluded that really they probably live in groups because their preferred habitat um, is a pandanus palm, um, which is a species that grows in the tropics. Um, so they really like to nest in this pandanus, um, and so that's probably why they live really in groups. And then they if you look at the pecking order of the groups, you'll find that the females are at the bottom of the pecking order. The juvenile females are at the bottom, and then they have the adult males will be at the top of the pecking order. So, and the brighter red the males, the higher up the pecking order they are as well. So if you see a really bright red male coming your way, you get out of there.
Do they operate as a pair when they're breeding, or do they have a group feeding?
No, very much as a pair. So they live in these loose colonies, and they just defend the area really close to their nest, um, and not not anything else around it. But they and I have I'm afraid to say I did do some genetic work on them, but I never finished my analysis, so that's on my to-do list. But if you people will tell you that they're monogamous, and that they will stay with the same in the same pairing for their whole lives. But from what we know about other birds, as soon as you start doing genetics, you find out that that's not true at all.
Yeah, they all like to play away.
Yeah.
And you also worked, as you mentioned, then with the Gordian finches. Now that was quite a while ago, but were you especially drawn to Gordians, or did you just get an opportunity to be involved with them?
I just got an opportunity, really, as a lot of my life has gone. I just somebody who I had worked with before said, I'm looking for somebody to help with this project, and she said, I'm actually looking for two people, and at the time time, so this is going to go on a little bit of a tangent. At the time, I had just returned from working in South Africa, where I had met my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, and he was Scottish, is Scottish. So we had left South Africa and I'd come to Australia and he'd gone back to Scotland. And we'd sort of said, well, one of us is going to have to move countries. And when this opportunity came up, she said, I'm looking for two people to work in the field, and he's also a biologist. And I said to her, well, I know this really great Scottish guy. And so she hired us both. So not only did I get to work on this amazing bird, but I got to work with my partner as well.
And some people might be really jealous because you worked with mongooses in Africa.
I did, yes. Slender mongooses.
um, you've sort of had the dream team, haven't you? I mean, a lot of people would kill to work with mongooses, um, and their ilk, because they're incredibly intelligent animals as well.
They are. They're fantastic. This is my one little foray into mammal research, and then I realized that how much better birds are, so I came back to birds. But I did love the mongooses very much, and my partner worked on meerkats at the same field site. So there's this fantastic project in South Africa called the Kalahari Meerkat Project, and now out there they work on everything from, they're working on the meerkats and bat-eared foxes and naked mole rats. They also work on hornbills and pied babblers. And if you are a researcher listening to this who's looking for some field experience, they are volunteer positions, but it is amazing experience that has really set me up in a lot of ways.
Oh, that's great. I don't know. Was it your photo of the pied babbler that I saw somewhere? They're an incredibly weird looking bird. If you're only familiar with the Australian babblers, it just doesn't seem right being nearly all white.
Yeah, so our babblers in Australia are pseudo babblers.
Not real
They're not
babblers.
real babblers. They're not related. The pied babblers are amazing, and that project is headed by Amanda Ridley, who's now in Perth.
So it's you're always moving around as a researcher, aren't you?
Yes, very much so. But the great thing about that is you end up with friends all over the world.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, Kat, I I always like to know more about the researcher as well as the research, because it's a sometimes precarious lifestyle that you're living, just simply because you never know how the funding sources are going to be maintained from funding cycle to funding cycle. That might be 1 year, that might be 2 years, that might be 5 years. So tell me tell me how you when did you know that you were a bird nerd? What do you have a point in time where you thought, God, I love these little fellas?
I don't think there's a time in my life when I wasn't a bird nerd. I think that's the honest answer. I was born in South Africa, and spent the there till I was 9. And I remember there, we had a nest box in the garden with crested barbets in it, and um, my mum is very much into wildlife as well. So people would always be bringing us things to raise. So we had a little mouse bird that we hand raised, and lots of doves as well. So we've come from that sort of background, and I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that both my brother and I are biologists, and we've both got a special interest in birds. Um, so I think, yeah, it's in our DNA.
All right. Well, I always like to know what your favourite bird is. So, do you have a favourite bird or a favourite family or tribe or type?
It's such a difficult question, and I probably always give a different answer to this. But I mean, I'd say my favorite group of birds is the finches. I really love the finches. But if I had to pick a particular bird that I love the most, it would probably be the spotted pardalotes.
Which, of course, everyone researching something always says that. So you get to have a couple of goes. So the finches is a good one. Do you have a soft spot for a particular finch?
I think I'll always have a soft spot for the crimson finch, um, because I spent such a long time looking into their very private lives during my PhD. So they will definitely always be a very special bird for me.
Were you ever a bird keeper?
No, when I was a kid, we had a cockatiel, and we had for a little while we had a lovebird that somebody left us when they moved overseas, but never really had pet birds other than rescues.
So you've you've been to some pretty amazing locations. So do you, do you have when you're not doing research? Do you have somewhere where you really love to go bird watching, or that is on your list of somewhere that you really want to go?
Uh, Everything's on my list of places I'd really like to go, if I'm honest.
What's on the top
Um,
of the list?
what's on the top of the list? Well, I'm supposed to be in Borneo right now. Um, Unfortunately, that trip had to be cancelled. So that's probably on the top of the list because I've done a lot of research into that now. So at the moment, that would be my current favorite.
So
Um,
can I just interrupt you there? What would be the purpose of that Borneo trip?
to catch up with my mother-in-law, actually. So my
How
mother-in-law in
cool!
Scotland decided for her birthday we would all meet somewhere different, and so we decided to meet in Malaysia. But the Borneo side of it was just going to be a side trip that my husband and I would take just for wildlife watching.
To go and check out the gibbons.
Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose we could come across some of them, but it's the birds really
The
that I'm
birds.
looking for.
Yeah, yeah. Um, um, is it difficult to organise a trip to Borneo? I think a lot of people would love to go bird watching in the wilds of Indonesia. Is it a difficult task to organise?
I found it very easy because so part of my other work that I do is as a tour guide here on Bruny Island. And the company that I work for does tours all over the world. And so one of the places that they tour to is Borneo. And so I just got in touch with their guide over there, and he put together a nice itinerary for us. So we were going to specifically have a guided tour because I I know nothing about Southeast Asian birds, and I can just imagine that staring into the rainforest canopy could be very, very frustrating um, when you've only got a limited time.
Yeah, I think you'd probably want to do a bit of homework on bird calls and whatnot too, wouldn't you, to know what to look out for. Now, I notice on your web page you've got Anala Nature Tours. Now, is that you, or is that a separate company that you're working for that happened to be based in Tasmania?
No, they're a company based in Tasmania, so that's the property that I'm on at the moment, where I was talking about the beautiful Forty-spotted Pardalote colony. So Dr. Tonya Cochran, she um, is the head of the company. So we've got a number of guides here in Tassie, and I just accidentally got into tour guiding. I think when you love showing people birds, it's quite a natural thing to fall into.
I I'd always wondered about being a bird guide because I thought it's a bit like I can't remember what the movie is, but there's a movie where someone's taking some birders around on a tour, and there's this couple of totally obnoxious Americans who won't stop talking, and they disturb every bird in every site that people go to. So I don't want to talk about Americans, but do you find that there are difficult birders?
Um, I think we're quite lucky because people come to us because they want to find birds, or because they're interested in birds, and there's definitely some people who are um, they want to talk about the birds, and if they happen to see something, then that's fantastic. But everyone has a different idea of what they want from a tour, so I haven't come across anybody particularly difficult, luckily.
Knock on wood. Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
oh, that's great. Um, so Borneo was sort of at the top of your list because your mother-in-law wants to meet up there. Is there anywhere else that you sort of got? Oh, I mean, you've done a lot of work with in the tropics by the look of it. Have you ever thought, gee, I wouldn't mind getting down to Antarctica or pitching a tent on South Georgia?
Oh wow, that would be amazing. I have thought about it a lot. Despite living in Tasmania, am very much not a cold weather person. So, um, yeah, it'd be a difficult trip for me. Definitely the tropics. I guess my second biggest wish list, which is a big wish list, is just South America. Some amazing places in South America for wildlife watching.
Yeah, well, I think the whole Amazon, Colombia, Belize, the Andes,
Yeah.
Patagonia, yeah, they roll off the tongue, don't they? It's certainly, I think, well, I share that desire with you for sure. As a professional bird person, and that's a very good thing to be, I think, Kat. Deriving your living and your lifestyle from hanging out with our feathered friends. What's your bird guide of choice when we're talking about Australia?
Good. So my very first bird guide I actually stole from my brother, which is the Simpson and Zay, and that's still my favorite.
Still your favourite?
Yeah, it's an easy answer
It
because I'm used to it because I've
yeah,
used it my whole birding career really.
yeah.
It's I find it very easy to know exactly where I'm going in it.
That's as valid an answer as anything. Familiarity,
Yeah,
adequacy. You can't complain about that.
exactly.
Did you ever use? Have you ever sort of used the Slater guides?
I have. I actually I have all the bird guides in Australia, so I do have a collection of all of them, and do love them all for different reasons. And the Slater Guide is definitely a very beautiful
Yeah,
book.
that was sad. The news of Peter Slater's passing in the
Absolutely devastating for everybody.
I don't know about you. I think I put out a tweet that when I saw that news, that I reckon Peter Slater was the most influential person on my childhood, just simply because I remember waiting and waiting and waiting for the publication of Volume Two of the. I had the non-passerines, and I'd already split the webbing and whatnot before Volume Two with the Eastern Yellow Robin came out, and I was just a bird nut, at a young age, and I never got to meet Peter Slater. I tried, but I never got
Yeah.
the opportunity. But yeah, I don't know what kind of a man he was or anything, but that was a revolutionary bird book when it came out.
Yeah,
Really.
that's such a beautiful story, and I'm sad to say that I never met Peter either.
So well, another great has gone. Who's a
Yeah.
I haven't ever asked anyone this before, Kat, but who's a to you who's a great in the birding community?
Um, ah, such a difficult question. I can think of half a dozen names, but I guess a lot of people that I'm thinking of are researchers
Yeah,
rather than the general bird community. I guess the first person that pops into my head is actually Sean Dooley from BirdLife Australia because he is putting himself out all the time trying to get the general public interested in birds, and everybody everywhere knows his face and his name.
but yeah, he's Sean certainly got some great stories. Is there? I mean, David Attenborough's obviously an icon. are there any other sort of famous birders that you can think of?
In Australia, I'm sure there are.
Oh,
I
not
just
not limited to Australia. I mean, I've
oh,
I've got one on my wish list, but I'm not having any luck. Oh no, I've got two from the UK. One has said, "Thanks for reaching out. I'll get back to you," which I think was a really polite saying, "Not interested." The other one hasn't even responded, but they're both famous, and I think people will be surprised that they're so nutty about birds. Do you have a celebrity birder that you're aware of?
um, I guess I mean at the moment, all the people that I'm thinking of are in the US. There's a lot of big names in the US, and the one that comes to mind at the moment because I see a lot on Twitter is actually Jason Ward. I have no idea how big he actually is in the US, but on Twitter he's very big.
He's Twitter famous.
um, he's very Twitter famous, and he has a I think it's a TV series, Birds of North America.
Yeah.
So he's definitely the person that first comes to my mind. I mean, and then it's a difficult that Twitter famous thing. It's a big difference between people who I think are amazing and should be household names and people who are actually household names.
I'll let you in on my two. There's Bill Oddie, who I think you sort of forget how old he's
Yeah.
getting, But with the passing of Tim Brooke Taylor, I thought, gee, I better. If I want to speak to Bill Oddie, I'm going to have to really push and push and push and push. And Bill Bailey, who would have thought that he was a bird nut?
I was thinking as soon as you said Bill Oddie, I thought, of course, Bill Bailey. A lot of these comedians who are sneaky bird watchers.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Bill Bailey's very. He's not secretive about it.
No.
But Bill Oddie was right out there for years about being a complete bird nerd. Ah, yeah. Well, Kat, what's next for you? Do you think after the 40-spotted Pardalote project sort of reaches its end for you? I'm guessing hopefully it's going to be ongoing and ongoing and ongoing for others. Where do you see perhaps in 5 years' time? Where's Kat?
I really have no idea. I've never been much of a planner, and that's why I've been able to move around so much, I guess, for my work. But we've got no plans to leave Tasmania at the moment. So my partner is working down here on Tasmanian Devils, and so while he wants to do that, we're in Tasmania. So we've got no plans to go anywhere else. So I guess my next 5 years is doing some guiding. So both within Tasmania and hopefully expanding that to around the world as well with the Nile Nature Tours. And then I'd love to, as long as funding allows me to, I will be working with the Difficult Bird Research Group on everything they do. So the 40-spotted pardalotes and the swift parrots and orange-bellied parrots and masked owls. And I mean, there's funding is a problem, but ideas are not.
If somebody was sitting on a pot of money and they wanted to help out, Kat, how could they do that? What would be the best way for them to approach assisting your work in particular?
Yeah, so very, very grateful for anybody donating any amount of money. So the Difficult Bird Research Group, we're at www.difficultbirds.com. And there is an option through there to both learn about the work that we are doing and to donate towards that.
Hopefully, I'll be able to speak to everybody over the course of the Bird Emergency podcast, to speak to everyone doing work with the Difficult Bird Group, because from an Australian point of view, it's an extremely important team of researchers, and I think from the world point of view, it's a really big contribution to the knowledge of some pretty unique species. As we've discovered today, as I've found out, we've got a farmer. We've got a farmer
Yeah.
in the difficult bird community, which I didn't know about. So thanks for bringing me up to speed on that, Kat. Thanks for being another participant in the Bird Emergency podcast. And I wish you all the best in your endeavours. And your partner, who I know who he is. He's now also doing extremely important work with the species on the edge. So you guys have, as a team, making a real contribution. And I hope after hearing about your work that some other people are encouraged and motivated to be involved and to make some kind of a real difference to preserving the birds that are fast disappearing from the face of the planet. So thanks very much, Kat.
Thank you to you too. It's very kind words, and I very much enjoyed talking to you. I think you're doing a very great thing with this podcast. So thank you for the work that you are doing.
Well, if you're like Kat and you like the podcast, just you can hit us up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere that podcasts are available. And hey, we all like a bit of positive reinforcement or a bit of constructive criticism. So leave us a review and tell us how great Kat is.